Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. Chapters is the show that profiles authors, editors, and publishers in the states of West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. I'm Elliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us today. On our program today, we are joined by author Vicki Hall. We're talking about her latest novel, and it's her debut novel, Simple Days, Honest and True, My Appalachian Roots, Realities, and Reasonings. And Vicki Hall joins us today. She's a native of Huntington, West Virginia. She taught 8th grade language arts for 28 years in Lawrence County, Ohio schools. She holds a BA in Speech and English and an MS in English, all from Marshall University. She's retired from teaching now, and she divides her time between writing, bridge playing, yoga, and loving on her grandchildren. She lives on the banks of the Ohio River with her husband John, who is an acting municipal court judge. And we're pleased to have Vicki Hall with us today to talk to us about her excellent book, Simple Days, Honest and True. So Vicki, welcome to Chapters. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Elliot. I appreciate your time.
I wanted to ask you, there's so many things about your book that I loved, but one thing that really caught my attention when I first started reading was what you put in the author's note, because I thought it was very poignant, and it kind of ties into what you write about later on in other chapters. But you write in the first note, "The West Virginia and Southern Ohio I grew up loving and residing in was much different from the Appalachia of today." What do you mean by that, that concept that it's different now than it was when you were growing up?
Well, I think the beauty, the innocence that I grew up with, the safety that I grew up taking for granted, is no longer a part of Appalachia, is no longer a part of Huntington. We have a tremendous drug problem. We have a tremendous homeless problem. And those things didn't exist back in the 50s and the 60s. I grew up feeling very safe in this community, and that's not necessarily the case today. Walking here to do this interview, I was approached by some citizens that I didn't really feel comfortable with. So things are quite different for my grandchildren than they were for me.
When you think about your time, since you've lived here, I know most of your life and spent a lot of time in this region, what are some of the things that you feel like, and I know you kind of touch on some of these in your book, but some of these things that have led to sort of this difference in culture that we have now from maybe when you grew up? What are some of the things that you feel like have led us down this road to where things just aren't the same?
Well, I think it's a snowball. The problem with the jobs, not having the meaningful jobs, not having the good paying jobs that were those were opportunities that my parents had and that I had that a lot of the people growing up in Appalachia don't have. They don't have access to good paying jobs. I think that because of that, then the drug problem takes hold. And then because of the drug problem, then I think a lot of the crime takes hold because the people are trying to pay for their drugs and to satisfy their habit. So it's just a snowball effect, a negative snowball effect that, back in the 50s and 60s, my parents were concerned about making a good living and leading a good life and supporting, the family and staying together as a family. And I think the family has really suffered over the last 30, 40, 50 years.
You mentioned family, and I really enjoyed chapters 2 and 3 of your book because we get to learn about your family and your parents. You start chapter 2 titled Dad, chapter 3 is titled Mom. Tell us a little bit about your mom and dad and why, when you were writing this book, you wanted to have chapters featured on them.
Well, my dad's chapter was the very first chapter that I wrote, and I wanted to write about him because his family was so dynamic, was so just fun and fun-loving. He grew up dirt poor in Jackson County, West Virginia. He grew up in Ripley, West Virginia, down a dirt road called Mud Run. And he was one of 12 children. And he learned early on the importance of hard work, the importance of an education, and the importance of family. His father died when he was 3 years old, and so my grandmother was raising 12 children with no income. So it was a tough row to hoe back then. And my mother's family was much the same. She grew up in backwoods Mason County, West Virginia, in Point Pleasant. Again, dirt poor. They didn't have anything, but they had each other. Big families, close knit, and they made it through. My dad was the only one of the 12 children to graduate from high school, and my mother was the first one of the 12 children to graduate from high school on her side. So they both knew that education was extremely important, and they knew that, or felt that that was a way out of the poverty that they'd been born into.
As you look at yourself now, older now and having retired and worked, what do you think are some of the values they've instilled in you as you grew and got older and married and had children and did all those things? What are some of the values that you can say, you know what, I'm like mom in this way and I'm like dad in what way?
Yeah, the same kind of core values: hard work, the importance of hard work, the importance of an education, the importance of voting, and making sure that your vote counts, that you don't think that you're not important, and just understanding and realizing that family is important, and that regardless of your disagreements or regardless of political views or religious views, that family sticks together. And those were some of the values that they instilled in me, and that I hope I've instilled in my own children.
There are three names also that pop up about midway through your book: Jessica, Nicholas, and Brennan. Tell us who they are.
Okay, Jessica is my oldest child. She's my daughter. And Nicholas is my oldest son. And Brennan is my youngest son. And I'm very proud of them. Jessica and Nicholas are pharmacists. And Brennan is a teacher, like I was. So I'm very proud of all three of them. They're very high-functioning adults that I think have picked up on some of the values that I've tried to teach them.
I wanted to ask you about another character in your story who's not human, but that you write about, and that is your English bulldog Oscar. And I loved learning about him, but you even have this quote on the back page, and I wanted to ask you about this, or on the back cover. "Taking care of my English bulldog Oscar is a joy and a privilege. He teaches me to live in the moment. He teaches me to love enthusiastically and without reserve. And he teaches me that just to be in the presence of the one you love can bring comfort and peace and contentment." So what a special relationship it seems like you had with Oscar.
Oh, absolutely. And, I had never had a pet in my life until I was about 55 years old, and never had one, never wanted one, just didn't ever feel the need for one. And Oscar came into my life by chance and just taught me so much. Oscar was such a joy. He was so loving. He was so kind. He was so special. His favorite place was right in the crook of my leg. And wherever I would go in the house, he would follow me. I would hear those toenails on the wood floor following me to see where I was going to rest, because wherever I was going to be, that's where he was going to be. Just a special, special bond that I will never forget. He was really something and really special in my life. He didn't ask for much. And I had always thought, oh, animals were, they were just there for the food. That as long as you had the food, that, they were your friend. But I found out that's not true. The food is the very least of it. He wanted just to be near me. He didn't care if my hair was combed. He didn't care if I had on makeup. He just loved me for who I was, and that was just so special.
I loved reading about him, and I think anybody that has a pet now, has had a pet in the past, or is thinking like you did at one time, should I get a pet? They're missing out on something special.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. He was, he was, as far as medical. I mean, he had a lot of issues, but he was worth every penny. He was absolutely just love, 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 pure love.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about one chapter that I thought was really poignant, chapter 12, just titled Cancer. And I know you talk a little bit about the time that you went to have a mammogram. This was kind of around the same time of the year that your dad died. When did all this happen time-wise, year and month and that sort of thing, first off?
My dad died in 1997. And I usually went to have mammograms in December of every year. I just always remembered, that was when December came, that was time for my yearly mammogram. But Dad died on December 15th, and I was a mess that year, and I didn't go. So the following year, I was getting my act together and functioning pretty well, and I remembered the mammogram and went to have one. And after the mammogram, they called me and said they wanted to do a second one. And after the second one, then they wanted to do the needle biopsy. And after the needle biopsy, the doctor's office called and said they needed to see me in the office immediately, and they told me to bring someone with me. Mm-hmm. So it is not going to be good. Mm-hmm. I felt fine. I didn't feel any lumps. I, thought I was healthy. And we went to the doctor, and my husband and I sat there while the doctor told me that they'd found cancer cells. And I was given some options. And it was just, it was like it was surreal because, like I said, I felt good. I wasn't sick, and here's someone sitting across the desk saying the cancer word. Mm-hmm. So my husband was great. We decided, the procedures and what to do. I decided to have a lumpectomy and radiation. And I went through 36 radiation treatments. And have been cancer-free since 98. So, knock on wood. I feel great, and like I said in the book, as far as cancer goes, I feel extremely lucky. Mm-hmm. When I was going through my radiation, a whole lot of people there were going through a whole lot of things that were worse than what I was going through. Mm-hmm. When I was having the radiation, they put you in a room and they turn off the light and they go out the door and you're there with this machine. It doesn't take long, but I prayed and just prayed for God to let me see my children graduate from high school and let me see what kind of adults they were going to be. And, I knew it was in God's hands because it certainly wasn't in mine.
Mm-hmm. I wanted also to ask you about sort of the process of putting this book together. First of all, when did you decide that you wanted to write this kind of a book? And I know you mentioned that you wrote you wrote the chapter about your dad first, but was this a collection of essays that you had written over time and you decided to put into a collection, or did you realize that you wanted to write a book about these experiences and just kind of sat down and started writing them out?
Well, when I taught writing to 8th grade students and 7th grade students, and I would always journal. I would write with my students. but never anything formal. I always wanted to write a book. When I retired from teaching, one of my goals on my bucket list was to write a book. But after I retired, the grandkids started coming, and that took up my time. So when I retired, I had a list of things that I wanted to write, not even an outline, but just a list. I wanted to write about Oscar. I wanted to write about my dad. I wanted to write about just a list of things. And then in 2016, it was Father's Day, and I was coming out to water my plants and pull weeds, and I slipped on my front porch, and my ankle broke in 3 places. And it was like, in a split second, my whole life changed. I went from being independent, being very headstrong and knowing what I wanted and where I wanted to go, to being totally dependent on everyone else for everything. We ended up in the hospital, and they, were talking plates and screws and surgery, and it was just, total inundation with all of these things that I had no idea how to deal with. So when I did have the surgery, and they brought me home, and my world was so small. It was the couch to the bathroom, to the couch to the bath. I mean, it was just extremely small. And I sent John, my husband, and my son Brennan out to get me a new computer. And I thought, I can't do anything. I can't babysit. I can't work in the garden. I can't clean the house. I'm going to have to do something, or I'm going to go out of my mind. So I started writing. And that's really when things started coming together, because I was writing 8 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. And, when you have that kind of time to devote to a project, you start making some real headway. And so I wrote the book, was still recovering. I was still with a cane. I was off the crutches, but I was out of the wheelchair and just with a cane. I saw in the newspaper Patrick Grace was teaching a life writing class, and I thought, that's exactly what I need, because I had written the book, but it was still a manuscript. It wasn't in book form. So I took 2 of the life writing classes, and Patrick helped me organize. He helped me rewrite. He helped me see things in a little bit different way. And I added to some things. So, I had the basic manuscript, but after taking the life writing class, I had a much better view of what the book was going to look like. And so that's how we got to the point where, yes, it is going to be a book. He put me together with a wonderful editor. She's a senior at Marshall, and she's just very, very bright, very smart. And she helped me tremendously. I say, I thought I was a much better writer until I wrote the book. Mm-hmm. And after I wrote the book, I thought, oh my goodness, what it takes, the time and the patience, you just don't realize what goes into it, how many decisions have to be made, how much time has to be spent. I'm a big picture person. I'm not a real minutia kind of person. And Haley, my editor, really helped me with that. And so has Patrick. Patrick has a really good sense of what looks good and how it looks on the page and with the cover. They helped me tremendously.
Very good. I want to ask you about another story in the book that I just love, because I just laughed. I laughed a lot. It was chapter 14, Train. One of the strangest stories is one of my students of one of my students, was that of a kid who stole a train. Yes, a train with an engine, a caboose, and a choo-choo. This is probably one of my favorite stories of the whole book because I think it says so much about children and childhood and adults and how we relate to children. Briefly tell us a little bit about what goes on in that chapter because it is just an amazing story.
It is an amazing story, and the child that it's about, he's an amazing child. He was someone that, as a teacher, when you first become a teacher, you think, oh, everyone learns alike. Everyone, gets it the same way that you hope they do. But after you teach, you find out that could not be further from the truth. That everyone learns differently, and everyone has their own style and their own learning style, and sometimes as teachers we just miss a lot. We miss the how to get to the kids that are not in the mainstream, kids that don't learn the way we learn. But I had this student, and he was a challenge, to put it mildly. I tried to reach him, and I just couldn't. Just failed over and over everything I tried. And I tried a lot. We had meetings. Just couldn't figure out how to reach him. And at the end of the school year, I always do a speech where the students get to choose their own topic. And he wanted to choose trains. Well, I tried to dissuade him. I told him that, that was too broad. You need to narrow it down. And I told him, do you really know anything about trains? Do you, oh, he assured me he did. This was a child that barely talked to me. And I had trouble getting him to pick up a pencil. He was just totally oblivious to any of my attempts to try and reach him. So at the end of the school year, the last week, he walked into my room with papers and with posters and with all of this information about trains. And he stood up and gave the most wonderful speech, one of the best speeches I've ever seen an 8th grade student give. The kids were interested, they were engaged, they were asking questions, he was answering them. I was just floored. It was like this was a different child. And so, he told me that he and his grandpa went to train shows together, and that's where he got interested, and he knew so much. Well, he goes on to high school, and I think, I'm just so proud of him. He's just such a he really came around and patted myself on the back. Oh, I really brought him out of his shell. And so he goes to high school, and I don't hear anything from him for a couple of years. And then I hear that he had gotten into some kind of trouble, and he'd been sent to a detention center. And lo and behold, there was a tourist train that ran behind the detention center. And one night, in the middle of the night, he had gotten another kid to go with him. And he and this kid had stolen a train and driven it for 13 miles down the track. And there were police chasing the train, there were fire trucks chasing the train, and he's just driving the train. And the people that he finally stopped. He didn't wreck. He finally stopped it, and the people that ran the train said he had to have known exactly. He had to maneuver around so many other cars to get that train to where he was going, that it was just amazing that he was so bright and so brilliant in that one area.
Yeah. It was a great story. I laugh out now, not advocating for people to steal trains and other things, but I just thought that said so much about childhood and interest And it also came across as one of those stories when we hear that expression, truth is better than any fiction you can write.
Absolutely.
That's a wonderful story that truly happened. It was one of my favorite stories because I think it says so much about children and teachers
And he's doing well. I
I was
talked
going to ask
to
you
him.
about that.
He's doing really well, and I want to invite him to a book signing because he's a really special student.
That's great. I wanted to ask you too, Vicki, about your cover. One of the things that really stands out about your book, not only the writing and the storytelling, but the cover is beautiful. We've got this kind of goldenrod, buttercup yellow, but this beautiful picture here of the flowers in the lower left corner, and then the trees and the mountains and the river. Where is this picture, first of all, and is this something you had wanted to include in the book, or is this something that was taken after the fact? How did the cover come together?
Well, it came after the fact. During the book, when I was in my wheelchair recovering from my broken ankle, my husband would roll me out, and I'd get up early because I wanted to see the sunrise. Mm-hmm. And this is the view from the back deck. So he would roll me out on the back deck, and I'd watch the sunrise in the morning and pray to God to heal my ankle and let me be able to walk again. So then after I wrote the book, I met Patrick, I invited him over to the house, he and his wife, and showed him the view. This is West Virginia, and this is the Ohio River, and then this is Ohio. But my husband took the picture. We took a whole bunch of pictures, and one, the tree was in the middle, and one, the tree was, and like I said, I'm a big picture person. I don't really look at the details, but my husband John was instrumental, and as was Patrick, in getting this cover exactly right. But yeah, that's my view from my back deck.
It's beautiful. It just reminds me of late spring, early fall. It just has that wonderful quality to it. So, Vicki, in our final moments with you here today, if someone wants to get in contact with you to talk to you about your book, Simple Days, Honest and True, or to get a copy of your book, how can they get in contact with you, and where can they get a copy of your book?
I'm on Facebook. It's Vicki Palmer Hall. I'm on Facebook. They can also email me at jehall51@zoominternet.net. And I have books, Publisher's Place, and Mid-Atlantic, Highlands. They're going to put the book here in Empire and in Books A Million, and I understand it's also going to be available on Amazon.com in about 10 days.
Very good. Excellent. So
Okay.
It's a wonderful book. The title of the book is Simple Days, Honest and True, My Appalachian Roots, Realities, and Reasonings. Vicki Hall has been our guest here today on Chapters. This is a wonderful book, a wonderful collection of essays about growing up, about life, about faith, about children, family, and so many other things that many of us who are from Appalachia, born and live in Appalachia even today, can identify with. So, Vicki, congratulations on your debut book. It's a wonderful book, and I encourage any of our readers to check out a copy. And thanks for coming on Chapters to talk about it.
Thank you.
I also want to take a moment to thank the staff and management of Empire Books and News for providing our on-site support and assistance today. We encourage you to come down to Empire Books and News and pick up a copy of Vicki Hall's book, and also remind you that many of the author, editors, and publishers featured on our program have their works for sale right here at Empire Books and News. So come on down to Pullman Square and look for any reading taste you need satisfied right here at Empire Books and News. And we appreciate their support and sponsorship each and every episode here on Chapters. And if you're a social media user and you'd like to stay in touch with the program, we've got a variety of ways that you can do that. One of the first ways you can do that is through our email address, and that email address is right here at the bottom of the screen. Once you send that email in, please let us know your name and the community or town in which you're writing from so that we can keep track of that correspondence. If you're a YouTube viewer and you like to watch programming on YouTube, we've made it possible for you to follow us on YouTube through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube and through the Chapters tab associated with that website. And that address is also here at the bottom of the screen. Once you type that into your your search browser, just look for the Chapters tab, and we've got all of our author, editor, and publisher interviews from over 3.5 years of work done here on Chapters available to you through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube. And we also have a Facebook page. All you need to do is go to Facebook and plug in the information that's also here at the bottom of the screen. And from there, you can see our most recent episodes archived for you. You can interact with viewers. You can like, you can share, and repost those interviews on your own Facebook page or through other features and platforms available through Facebook. And we know a lot of you have done that. You've shared the interviews. You've commented on YouTube. You've sent us emails. And we do appreciate all of that correspondence and feedback that we receive from you. So please keep it coming, and please stay in touch with us on social media. And that's going to do it for us this time on Chapters, but please come again next time. And in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.